Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. My name is Lucas, and I have Eric here as always.
Hey guys.
Before we begin today's video, I do want to thank all of you for hitting 400 subscribers. Right now it is at 404. The special will tentatively be coming out on Monday. I'm sorry that we completely procrastinated on it. Anyways.
You expected it, guys. Come on.
Anyways, today we'll be taking a look at the Democrats' best case scenario in the 2020 Senate elections. This is what happens if the Democrats can get everything to go their way. This will be highly unlikely, and this is not our actual predictions. You can take a look at that in our channel. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So let's first start off by putting the quote-unquote obvious Democratic states that we usually put as Democratic states before discussing those that might be flipping to the Democrats. So we got Jean Shaheen. I think we are going to put a safe from now on. Cory Booker, pretty popular, no surprise there. Minnesota will also be a safe Democratic state. I think I probably missed some, but I'll come back to them later. Republicans have a lot more.
I think.
Yeah.
Are we talking about obvious safes, or we're gonna put some other safes later?
We're just putting obvious safes at the moment.
Oh, at the moment, yeah. Illinois.
Oh yeah, Dick Durbin. He is the minority whip, I believe. All right. That is it, I believe.
West Virginia.
West Virginia. All right, now we're going to be discussing the states that will kind of become safe states now from those obvious, who are no longer, these are not the, oh my God, what am I saying? Anyways, these are not the obvious safe states. We are moving these in best case scenario to safe. Let's start with probably the most surprising one here, or a flip, Colorado. Colorado at the moment is a likely. It's really trending more to the left. The state of Colorado has moved to the left pretty significantly in recent years. Cory Gardner is a supporter of President Trump, a staunch supporter of President Trump. And President Trump obviously is a more conservative Republican. And the people of Colorado do not really want that. Well, they did vote Lauren Boebert, but that is the more rural district, I believe District 3. Don't count me on that, but Colorado.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so Colorado is trending more to the left. John Hickenlooper is a pretty solid candidate. He's got a solid amount of experience and popularity from when he was governor. He also ran for president. He has that name recognition. He was governor. He has name recognition from that as well. And because of that, he will be, I do believe that he can carry this state in a safe, if this is best case scenario. If he has all that funding, he can put it out, throw all those ads out. He can probably win this in a safe. But I will admit that it's not a safe. This is a likely safe. It's in between likely and safe, but it does tilt to safe column. All right. Another safe state is Michigan. Now, we usually do put this one as a safe, but we've been kind of thinking about it a little bit more. We kind of toned it down a bit, maybe to likely. John James is a relatively well-known candidate. He served in the military, but he doesn't have elected experience. He was the candidate in 2018 for Senate, but he lost. But he does have kind of name recognition from that. However, Gary Peters is outperforming him in the polls quite in a decent margin.
+7 is the most recent one, or +8.
Yeah, +7, +8, about that margin. So I think in a safe, I think Gary Peters will probably win the Senate race there. All right. What other safes do we have?
At this point, I think Virginia is also going to be a safe.
I forgot to mark that one. Virginia is safe. This is Mark Warner. I think he's going to win this one in safe. This is an quote-unquote obvious one where we usually put it as safe. I just forgot to mark it this time. I think that's the end of the safes. Alrighty. Now let's get discussing with the likelies. The first state that will actually go to a likely for me is the state of Arizona. Eric, why don't you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, so here in Arizona, we have Mark Kelly, the Democrat, versus Martha McSally, the Republican. You guys all probably know the story by now. Mark Kelly, former astronaut, married to a former representative. has is appreciated by a lot of Democrats here. Martha McSally, appointed by Governor Doug Ducey, not really elected. People do not really appreciate how she got into office, so they really are more in support of Mark Kelly. We usually put this in like a lean tilt area. Again, this is still Arizona, this new battleground swing state, but because this is Mark Kelly versus Martha McSally, given the same circumstances, I think this could go in a best case scenario. This will probably not happen at all in the real election. It will probably be somewhere in like a lean tilt area in the actual election, because right now Mark Kelly only leads by 3 points. So anything can still change.
I definitely agree with that. I think we saw some new polls recently. But I think the majority of polls do show him leading in like a pretty significant margin. Although in 2018, the polls did overestimate McSally to beat Kirsten Sinema, which she obviously didn't. However, I think Mark Kelly, I know some people do put this one as likely, but I don't think so for us. But however, in a best case scenario, this will probably go into likely. Now, let's head to the state of let's go with Mississippi.
All right.
We're putting the state as Mississippi as a likely in a best case scenario. This is between Hyde-Smith and the Democratic candidate, who is Mike Gillespie. In 20, whenever the special election was, there was a special election for this. It was surprisingly close. I believe it was the closest a Democrat came in quite a while. It's a rematch again. So, that's Alabama. It's a rematch again. However, I think that I just feel like SB isn't going to be able to overcome Hyde-Smith now. Hyde-Smith. I believe polling does show Hyde-Smith leading by a bit, but in best case scenario, I do think this one does go to Hyde-Smith at the end of the day. All right, now let's head to the state of South Carolina, which will also be a likely. And what's interesting here is we see Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham in the most recent poll. They are tied.
Wow.
That is quite surprising, especially how deep red South Carolina is. Didn't really think that would happen here. However, we got to keep into account that polling is left biased at times, and all the other polls do show Lindsey Graham leading. So I think in best case scenario, Graham still carries it just in a lesser margin. So I think it likely would make sense here. We also have the state of Kentucky, where we have the second most unpopular senator in the United States here.
Mitch McConnell.
Yes, he is the Senate Majority Leader. We recently found out that his opponent will be Amy McGrath, which does kind of increase the Democrats' chances here of winning, although it was never really high. It was definitely increased if it's definitely higher compared to if Booker won this race, since he's a progressive and Kentucky is relatively solid red. Fundraising wise, I feel like even if McGrath gets all that money, it's still going to Mitch McConnell. At the end of the day, I think it's a lead. Amy McGrath doesn't have elected experience. She did serve as a Marine, which I think does kind of help in a state like Kentucky. However, at the end of the day, it's Mitch McConnell. He's the Senate Majority Leader. He's going to probably pull out a win here. All right. Let's now head to, I guess we're doing the lean states now. So I'll actually do Alaska right now. Eric, you can cover like Alabama, I guess.
All right.
Alaska is also a lean. Now, this is interesting because in our last prediction, we put Alaska as a safe Senate seat for the Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, a couple of days ago, we finally got some polling out of the state of Alaska, and it was quite shocking. Sullivan only leads here by 5 points. That is pretty surprising. In a deep red state like Alaska, although it is trending more to the left, he's only leading by 5 points. Now, in the House elections, it actually shows Don Young's opponent leading, which was also kind of shocking. But again, polls might be left biased here. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe Alaska could be likely. It's in between lean and likely for me. I think a little bit more to lean, but it's definitely going to be
A
obviously
closer
closer.
race.
It's going to be closer in a best case scenario. I don't think it's safe at this point. We're going to put this one as likely. Did I say this between? Oh yeah, this was between Dan Sullivan and Al Gross.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting here that Al Gross, he is an independent, but I think he did say he was going to caucus for the Democrats if he was going to win. So essentially, basically a Democrat. But best case scenario, it's either lean R or likely R for me. So I think this one's definitely one that in best case scenario, it definitely is closer. Anyways, that's Alaska for you. All right, now let's head to
Alabama.
Eric, why don't you cover Alabama?
So this is Doug Jones, the Democrat incumbent. Yes, he had quite a shocking win. When he got elected, no one was really expecting it, and Democrats are pouring in funding for him to maintain that seat. In real life, we don't think that's going to happen just because of what type of state Alabama is and who's running. Trump actually endorsed or really appreciates Tommy Tuberville, the former football coach. He really doesn't like Jeff Sessions, which is another candidate. But in a best case scenario for the Democrats, this will probably be a tilt if the Democrats really, really try their best to keep Doug Jones in that seat.
Really? I would actually disagree with that. I would actually put this one as either lean or likely. And the reason for that is we got to keep into account that Doug Jones won the 2018 race, I think it was 2017 race against a alleged child molester. He had a bunch of allegations against him. He wasn't exactly the best candidate. In fact, Roy Moore ran in 2020, but he came in like fourth in the primary. If he's against someone like Jeff Sessions, if Doug Jones is against someone like Jeff Sessions or Tommy Tuberville, who was endorsed by President Trump, he's going to have a really hard time in the general election. Personally, I think it is probably a lean in best case scenario still. Because I think in a regular case we're saying likely, but in best case, even with all that funding, I think it's still going to be pretty unlikely that he wins the seat. So for me, it's in between lean and tilt. What do you think, Eric?
That really depends on how much funding really goes in and how significant that's going to play a role. Because honestly, other than that, I don't think Jones has a chance to maintain the seat just because Trump, endorsed this candidate, or he really highly appreciates him. So I really don't think Doug Jones has a chance. Maybe a lean tilt, but honestly, at this point, considering all the factors, probably a lean, considering that it was likely before this.
I guess so. I agree with you. I think we're putting this one as lean for a best case scenario for Democrats. All right. Let's now head to the state of Texas. This is John Cornyn's seat. As I said in previous episodes, we don't have a Beto O'Rourke candidate. Beto O'Rourke had so much money for fundraising. I think this was the most expensive Senate race for a very long time. In fact, it might have been the most expensive, but I'm not completely sure on that. We don't have a Beto O'Rourke candidate. He visited every single county in the state of Texas, and he got covered a lot on the media. So, in my opinion, John Cornyn will probably win this. Still in probably a lean. If we're saying best case is a lean, regular case it's likely. Yes, it's moving more and more to the left, but there are places in Texas where it is relatively conservative. So I do think that Cornyn will probably get reelected here anyway. What do you think about that, Eric?
Yeah. This new Democratic Senate candidate is really not known. I have never heard of him. And I think at this point, Cornyn pretty much secured the seat because, first of all, it's Texas. Although, yes, it is swinging to the left, not yet, not in this election will it go to the Democrats whatsoever. So he has a pretty good shot. Even if it's best case scenario for the Democrats, it's probably a lean. Again, this is highly unlikely. He'll probably take this in a likely safe margin.
I definitely agree with that. Let's now head to an interesting state here, to the state of Kansas. Again, this is a best case scenario. So I think if this is best case scenario for the Democrats, this means that everything goes right. So I think what that means is Kris Kobach wins the seat, wins the primary at least. If Kris Kobach were to win the primary and would be against Barbara Boyer, who I think is a pretty solid candidate experience-wise, in a regular prediction, that's I think honestly between a tilt and a lean. If we're talking best case scenario, I think this is a pure toss-up. And the reason for that is Kris Kobach in 2018 ran for governor. He was, again, the former Secretary of State of Kansas. He implemented some ID laws that I believe were pretty unpopular as Secretary of State. Now, running for governor as a Republican in a safe Republican state, I mean, you're pretty much expected to win, right? Well, that didn't happen in 2018. Laura Kelly, the Democratic candidate, did defeat Kris Kobach, which was very surprising. So I think Barbara Boyer might actually have a little bit of a chance against Kris Kobach. This is for me between between a toss-up and a tilt R. But I'll be honest here, even if Barbara Boyer wins, after 6 years, she's probably not getting reelected, unless she somehow goes up against another very bad candidate that she maybe will. But after 6 years, she's pretty much not getting reelected anyway. So for the meantime, though, I think the state is between a tilt R and a toss-up. Eric, what do you think about that?
I'm surprised that you mentioned a toss-up. I mean, at first, that's surprising to anyone. But again, when you really consider the facts here, if Kris Kobach does win the primary, which would be a best case for the Democrats, this could be a tilt. I'm not really sure about a toss-up. Again, this is Kansas, so I'm not sure a toss-up would really be that would be beyond best case scenario. So I think to keep it just a little bit realistic, I think I would put tilt R for this.
You know what? I agree with you. Yeah, I think you're right, because this is Kansas still. We do have a very conservative electorate. So I think Kobach, maybe it's a tiny chance in best case scenario, but it'll be interesting for a best case. All right, now let's also head to the state of
What's
let's
left?
go to
all the intense states.
Oh,
except one of them, but yeah.
Let's go with Iowa.
Sure.
I'll talk Iowa. Here we have Teresa Greenfield and
Joni Ernst.
Gosh, I was blanking out. Joni Ernst, yes. Joni Ernst isn't that popular. According to polling, Teresa Greenfield's actually leading. Kind of interesting. I think the state of Iowa, I think it will go the Democrats in best case scenario, but I think it's a very slim tilt. For me, it's in between a tilt D and a toss-up. Somewhere in between there, because Iowa is a pretty conservative state now. Went to Trump by almost 10 points in 2016. So I think it'll be relatively close. But I think that at the end of the day, in best case scenario, Greenfield will pull out a win here. Eric, why don't you discuss North Carolina now?
Yep. So this is Tom Tillis and Cal Cunningham's seat. They're battling for the seat. This was a very, very intense race. Likely it will be deciding who gets the majority or who maintains the majority in 2020. Polling, this is very interesting. A new poll shows how Cunningham, the Democrat, is leading by 8 points. This is not best case. This is for real. At the moment, Cal Cunningham is leading by 8 points. So honestly, at this point, North Carolina's a lean. It's crazy because a few weeks ago we'd be putting it for our actual predictions. We'd be putting it as tilt R, toss up. But at this point, the Black Lives Matter movements and the coronavirus impacted every race. So I think in best case, Cal Cunningham could take the state in a lean margin.
And I would completely agree. And one more factor is that it's a presidential election year. So not only might be people going out and voting for the Senate candidate, but they could also be going out and voting for potentially Joe Biden or Donald Trump in this case. Both might happen. So we might see increased turnout. And usually increased turnout does prove to be beneficial to the Democrats most of the time. So I agree with you. This one would probably be lean. Oops. All right. Let's head to Maine. Maine is interesting. Is an interesting state.
Yep, indeed.
Maine tends to elect very, very centrist senators. We can look at Olympia Snowe, who was before. Why did I say Martha McSally? Oh God, why am I blanking out today? Susan Collins. And they elected Angus King, who did get elected as an independent, but obviously caucused with the Democrats for committee reasons. But looking at the ideology chart, he is the definition of a centrist. He's like very slimly to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Susan Collins has been very, very unpopular. She is the most disapproved of senator in the United States. I feel like people might think she's getting a little bit too, too partisan almost. So I think that, in my opinion, Maine, in a best case scenario, it goes to lean. Incumbency advantage, yes. But we also have to remember that who she's against. She's against Sarah Gideon, who is the Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives. So that's quite a bit of experience. Of course, Andrew Romanoff in Colorado did. He lost the primary, though. But that was a little offhand. But Susan Collins is against someone with a relatively good amount of experience as a state legislator. So in my opinion, I think Sarah Gideon can win this one over her. All right, let's head to Georgia regular first. Georgia regular is interesting in that Jon Ossoff is doing quite well in the polls, actually. Mm-hmm. Best case scenario, I feel like it will still go to the Republicans, although it's swinging more to the right. I think it's going to be a tilt. It's going to be very close. Polling does show, I believe, is it really Ossoff leading? I think that's what polls are showing, which is kind of interesting. However, I do think that Purdue will be able to carry this, considering Georgia's electorate. Yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen here. Georgia special, best case scenario, Loeffler wins for the Democrats since she has been accused of insider trading. We don't know whether or not she actually did it. However, it's going to taint her. So I feel like, in my opinion, I think Georgia's special also would move to a tilt. Again, this is best case scenario for the Democrats. This is if we have kind of high turnout. Is that tilt? Yeah, that's tilt. If we have high turnout, lots of funding, very unlikely. I think it's still a tilt at the end of the day. In best case scenario,
mm-hmm.
I think that is what ends up happening here. All right. Now, Eric, how about you head to Montana, the final state in this best case scenario?
Yep. So let's head to the double Steves, Steve Bullock and Steve Daines. Steve Bullock is a Democrat. He ran for president in 2020. He's a very popular governor now. When he did drop out, he is now running for the Senate. Steve Daines worked in government. He was a representative and served some positions in politics there. He is fairly kind of ish known in Montana. I wouldn't really say popular. So it's kind of going to be a close race because Montana in general is a fairly conservative area. So, but we have this very popular Democratic governor here. So, and the polls show it's very close. I think even Bullock is leading. And considering that this is a best case, honestly, we'd probably do Montana lean because in our regular predictions, we're probably going to start putting Montana as a tilt state just based on what's happening and the polling.
I agree. In my opinion, regular-wise, this is between toss-up and tilt. Best case scenario, this does move to be a tilt or a lean D. Because we do have to remember that Montana usually does split their ballots sometimes between a Republican and a Democrat. In 2016, this state went to Donald Trump in a wide margin in the presidential election. However, that was also a governor election year, and they elected Steve Bullock to become the governor. And that's kind of interesting in that people are splitting their votes between parties. Got to keep that in mind here. So in my opinion, I would also agree that this is a lean state. 52 to 48. I don't think there was any major flips here. I think the only major flip was Iowa. Interesting. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please hit subscribe. We'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.